Thank you very much, Martin. I hope, can you guys see the
We can
slides
hear
and
you,
hear
yeah,
me?
and
I'll
yep.
see the screen, yeah, and see you.
Great. Wonderful presentation on there before me. Really interesting journey. So, from our point of view, as Martin described, we've gone a slightly different route to own from the perspective that we started as a direct consumer product. And then more recently, we started to provide an offering into healthcare. So lots of really interesting stuff happening. Um, what we've done fundamentally is a device to help people identify which foods they're able to digest, and also in some cases to help people identify certain digestive issues that are occurring in the gut that can be from the healthcare perspective that can be corrected from a medications perspective. So we started in 2016 and launched our first device. So this is the actual device here. So it's a small little device. We launched at the end of 2018 and we've sold over 25,000 devices worldwide. And just this year, we started to work more in healthcare. Initially with a focus on the US, but we're very excited to partner in Ireland because of course we're fully based here in Ireland. Um, so it kind of started for me with my wife, who she'd been diagnosed with IBS here in Ireland, and it's a condition that has everywhere in the world. Is even though it can affect 1 in 8 people or more, it's not as it's traditionally not been as suited to the healthcare system, where people get to the end of a long diagnostic process and they're told, oh, great, it's just IBS. So at the end of the process, the person still has all of the symptoms and potentially profound disruption to their lifestyle. But there's not necessarily a solution from healthcare. So for me, I was coming from an engineering background. I'd finished a PhD in electrical engineering, and I wanted to see what could help Grace. And I came across breath analysis, and I knew from my engineering that the technology that was being used in labs and in research and in hospitals could be replicated in a much smaller device using more recent sensing technology. So I made a prototype, and we were using it to good effect, and Grace was starting to be able to identify foods that she'd have to restrict, but then also quite interestingly, foods that she was pretty sure she couldn't consume. But with the confirmation of the breath analysis, when she started to reintroduce those foods into her diet, she felt okay. And so, and a big message for us is, if you have digestive problems such as IBS, in the long term, you want to move back to a situation where you've got a very diverse diet because that is ultimately much healthier, but you need to identify specifically what you can and cannot eat. So this is the sort of cycle we see, people bouncing between the internet, different clinicians. If you're lucky, you might get referred to a dietitian at the end, but it can be a long, painful cycle. And really, in general, the technology isn't available to do that sort of personalization. So people are typically relying on being handed a printed sheet of foods to avoid or foods to eat, and often it's not that helpful. So the technology, as Martin described, it's available in hospital environment. These are typically large, expensive devices, and because they're in a hospital environment, and given the limitations of testing in a hospital, you're typically talking about a single snapshot test. Uh, the way we look at it, if you can test in the home, and from a healthcare perspective, use telemedicine to support that, that means you can generate this vastly richer data set. So when you look at the next stage, then when you've got all of that data, you can start to apply AI and do really interesting things in terms of getting deeper personalization and leading to, in fact, being able to diagnose conditions, in a more precise way. So here's how the consumer product works, which is very relevant to healthcare as well, because we do offer a similar um, food sensitivity identification solution in healthcare as well. But you're logging your meals in the app, and you're taking regular breath tests throughout the day, so in between meals. And if you see an increase in the breath readings, that will signal, the app will show you which foods that you ate were most likely to have caused that issue. So over time, you're able to adjust what you eat. We've gotten some really good feedback, and you know, in many cases, people have had these issues for it could be a decade, and to get that sort of feedback to show that where we can just make a really significant impact in people's lives, it's very gratifying, and really helps motivate us. um, some of the kind of feedback, or some of the sort of accomplishments so far, I suppose. We've had very significant sales direct to consumer, and that's been growing. So we're 2x year on year. We're launching a second generation device, which is measuring additional molecules on the breath, which deepens what we can do from a gut health perspective, but actually potentially opens up other applications, which could be interesting for some of the people listening here. And we're also launching a medical device in the US at present. Hoping to launch something in Europe as well, but can be more challenging in terms of the regulatory uncertainty in Europe. We've got a patent US UK office, and we've got a lot of clinical validation, so external validation that's being conducted. So here's just an overview of the team, and I'll just skip through some of these just in terms of time. This is our clinical advisory board, some really eminent people there from different institutions, uh, based in the US actually. Um, and just in terms of the scale, these examples are from the US, but it gives you an idea of the scale of the problem that's been faced, and these sort of lessons will mirror what we see in Ireland with the HSE and further afield. But in the US, there's $134 billion of spend in gastroenterology. That was the latest figures in 2018. And, it's quite shocking. That's more than heart disease, more than diabetes, and it's also more than mental health. So really huge spend. I don't think that's appreciated. And, between colonoscopies, different types of imaging procedures, medications, there's a really, really big spend in gastroenterology. And in some cases, it's not necessarily delivering value for money. Um, IBS is the number one diagnosis in gastroenterology. So in the US, it's about 40, 50 million people. One in eight people in Ireland roughly are affected by IBS. It's a really common issue. And in the US, it's probably a bit higher in terms of the extra spend, but we're talking about an extra $2,000 per patient per year. So, when you look at the volume of people affected, that's very significant. Another condition that we're really doubling down on from a clinical perspective is SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It kind of came out of gastroenterology, but it's linked to a lot of conditions. So IBS is really where it was seen as this is a causal factor in a lot of cases in terms of IBS, but it's very linked to any condition or surgery or medication where it leads to the slowdown in the passage of food through the gut. So diabetes, dyspepsia, proton pump inhibitors from a medications perspective, they're the most commonly prescribed class of drugs in the world. Opioids, which have the same effect in terms of motility of food, and any of these surgeries. So a lot of people, for example, getting bariatric surgeries or have to get parts of their gut removed, is a common cause as well. Um, so, SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's where you're getting a buildup of bacteria in the small intestine. You don't want to have bacteria there because that's where the absorption of nutrients has to occur. And if there is excessive amounts of bacteria in that place, all that food coming in will just get fermented into gases and cause all sorts of disruption. So it's a really big issue. In globally, I guess the a common treatment for SIBO is a drug called Xifaxan. It's one of the most costly drug spends in the US. I'm not sure how commonly used the drug spend in Ireland, but there's a lot spent on this condition. Um, And so what's interesting is the test is usually through a breath test, or well, the suggested diagnostic test is through a breath test, but in most cases that's not done. And you know, a lot of that is due to like not having the technology to do the testing. Um, but you know, when testing it, so what's done instead is the clinician typically just prescribes the drug. So they give them this antibiotic, and in those cases, only 1 in 4 actually respond to treatment. So 3 in 4 is just waste. When breath testing is used, you know, like any diagnostic test, it's not going to be perfect in identifying like a really quite complex condition. You're doubling the response. So it means that you're getting a halving of the amount of antibiotic that's being prescribed, but then also the reduction in cost. So, and you know, from you know, in the US, of course, revenue potential is very significant, and you know, there is a big opportunity there as well. So our strategy, so we're focused on we're a small team. We're trying to see how we can address you know, initially the US market in a scalable way. So we're working with health systems and hospital systems mostly. So we're initially we've got a really good we're working with Veterans Affairs, who are actually the biggest health system in the US, to you know, to start providing a solution to these would be, you know, former soldiers effectively who with GI conditions, which is a really significant problem in that cohort. And then also the gastroenterology groups. So there's a lot of very large groups in the US who are collected together. And the real benefit is from a patient perspective, it's all of these sort of benefits which Martin's described and in other presentations, but when you can increase the satisfaction and the engagement when you can provide that um, you know, a telehealth remote based platform. So that's what we're seeing from an insurer perspective or from a health system perspective. Avoiding unnecessary treatments and procedures is a big win. You know, and for the physician, being able to do this sort of testing without the time, space, and staffing costs associated with that. So from the Irish perspective, where you can do these sort of things without necessarily a huge amount of resources, you know, required, it's a major benefit. So another thing we should mention is we've got a next generation device which is coming, and you know, some of the new molecules that have been measured. There's some really interesting. There's a study that came out of Nature and some other recent data to suggest that one of the molecules that we're measuring is elevated in you know, these two big degenerative brain disorders. Yeah, I heard it mentioned earlier about Parkinson's. So we're very open to collaboration. So if anyone, you know, if anyone's interested in working with us, please do get in touch. That's actually just a render of the new device, which is actually becoming available in November. Um, we've got quite a bit of validation, so you know, and in all cases, we're seeing a really good match with the existing benchtop equipment, and really, actually, in many cases, you know, uh, you know, the accuracy from our device we actually feel is better. But really good performance. We've got an ongoing clinical trial at Johns Hopkins. So we're up to 70 patients at the moment, and this is really to help to apply artificial intelligence to be able to do, you know, much like what Owen's building towards in terms of using AI to be able to build those patterns to be able to make these diagnoses. Um, so that's what we think is the future, and it will really help improve the accuracy of diagnosis. And so lots of potential there. So we've seen a really like a side effect of the study is we've been able to see that um, our device actually outperforming the kind of typical sort of mail-in SIBO testing kits. And we're diagnosing more patients as well, which is a positive thing, because you know, these are patients which often have, you know, severe digestive disruption and often malnutrition as well. And we're seeing that this real world day-to-day data has actually been a really strong predictor of response to treatment. So a really powerful study. This is kind of the makeup of the solution from a healthcare perspective. So we've got the device that's used in the home by the patient. Each patient has their own device. It's used through a smartphone app that connects through the cloud, and the clinician is able to view the results through a dashboard. So it's all done in a GDPR and HIPAA compliant way. And so, from the clinician's perspective and the admin's perspective, they're getting email notifications when tests are performed, and we're scheduling tests automatically for the patients. So it's something that becomes quite easy for them to implement in their practice. So yeah, just to kind of summarize, we've had over 25,000 devices have gone out direct to consumer, which has been really powerful in terms of self-management of these GI conditions. We've got some early sales and pilots from a healthcare perspective, with a focus on the US initially, and kind of looking to the future. We want to be able to gather data to show from a value-based perspective that we can save money, we can improve outcomes, and we can make the situation better from the health system perspective, from the patient's perspective, and from a clinician's perspective. We'll be applying AI to better diagnosis using real world data, and we're measuring new molecules on the breath to be able to improve the whole care journey. So that's actually the end of my slides. So thanks very much for listening.
It's a brilliant talk, Angus, and I mentioned at the start, we have an ambition in Ireland to move from a laggard to a leader. We can't do it everywhere, but it really strikes me this is a real opportunity for Ireland, given you're based in Ireland, and hopefully, we can really demonstrate, help you demonstrate success and really improve, patient lives. And when we talk about healthcare 4.0, self-management is really the sort of, a really key part of that. So, we're starting to explore to our audience, Angus and I and others are starting to explore how we can set up a living lab for Foodmarble, and we're really convinced it will be success. And sometimes you get resistance. I almost had a stand-up row with a senior clinician in Ireland who was poo-pooing this, and this would never work. But I'm reminded by what Thomas Watson said, the worldwide market for mainframes will be about 5. So I sometimes the experts really get it wrong. So Angus, congratulations on all you've achieved, and look forward to partnering with you and benefiting patients in Ireland and globally. Brilliant talk.